All right, we are live again. Thank you all for joining. We are at another live chat discussion for mental wellness. With the growing number of suicides that we've been seeing with adults and youth, among parents, we constantly hear them say statements like, I didn't see the signs, or I didn't know that they were going through what they were going through. And what we want to do through this live chat is open up the floor for conversations and discussions around the parent child relationship as far as communication is concerned. Communication is one of the biggest factors that impact our everyday lives, especially children. It's a huge part of development, and it is the common denominator for trying to really connect with the youth, our children, and allow them to understand they do have extra support. They do have other resources available. They are not alone. So, welcome to a CITCA live chat discussion. My name is Jacqueline Stevenson. I am the Executive Director of Counselors and Community Association. I have a background in mental health counseling, behavior science, and now organizational development. I'm going to allow my two co hosts to introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda, also known as Mandy. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I own the Sanctuary Care and Counseling Center. I have been practicing in the field of behavioral health since 2005, and I am just really, really committed and intentional about helping people to live healthy and whole lives.
Thank
Hello,
you,
everybody.
Amanda.
My name is Yashica. I go by Shika for most people. I'm a licensed professional school counselor, K through 12. I'm also a self-published author. I've been in the education system for about 7 years. I've been a counselor for 3. And so I'm just very intentional about children and making sure that they have the skills necessary to become healthy and functional adults.
All right. And just like that, we're going to dive in. So, before we get into the topic, right, there's an activity that we want to go over with you all because we want to open your minds up to other things that do exist that we can consider so that we're a lot more open to various forms of communication with our children, you know? So consider this: children internalize their friends' issues, they convince themselves exaggerated truths, they are overly influenced by everything they hear and see, and we aren't protecting them from them, right?
Right.
Now, are we speaking to understand perspectives, allowing free expression to connect or challenge those thoughts or beliefs that are sometimes irrational, and discussing mental health? So, these are just some things to consider as we go into the discussion. Now, how does the parent child communication impact mental health? I know I can remember back in our days with our parents, it was you really can't have a voice. Is you do what I say, don't talk
Yeah.
back. Anything you had to say, whether it was a question or whatever, because for me, I was always known as the one that was mouthy, right? But as I reflect on my childhood and my adolescent years, I remember I just was curious to understand. And but yet to the authorities back then, it was considered running your mouth or being disrespectful or being too grown. So those sometimes a lot of us parents are caught up in that old generational stigma that, we don't want our kids to become like we were growing up, and I'm old school and I'm gonna do it how my parents did it and all these things. But we are in another generation. We are raising a completely different generation that has access to so much right now. It's so important to consider, coming out of the old and into some new ways or forms of parenting, really. So give me your insight on the whole generational stigma, ladies.
Um,
It's funny. When I hear people talk about millennials and generational X, and I don't even know where we are now, but I used to be like, oh God, why do we have to talk in generations? We always have to classify all of these different things. But then I began to understand there is some differences that kind of comes along with that. And I think that just kind of informs and kind of gives us understanding. I think there is a huge generational gap, divide in regards to how parenting looks then and how parenting looks now. And let me be absolutely transparent. I have no children, but I do have lots of godkids, and I work, in communities with people that have children. But it's really interesting. A lot of parents or older parents. And it's funny to me that I'm now saying back in my day, but whatever. That people have no problem with downloading something or having apps on their phone or not remembering the last time they went to the post office and emailing things, like understanding and kind of moving in the flow with the evolution of those things is perfect, no problem. But people don't want to evolve when it comes to things that make them personally uncomfortable, particularly parenting. There's often this, I'm not doing that. No, this is my house, my rules. My mom, my dad didn't do that.
I don't need no resource. I'm good. I do what I gotta do.
So we can understand what happens when we're open to evolution in other areas of our lives. Why can't we extend that same grace to some of our thought patterns and behavior patterns to include parenting?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything you guys said. I think we have a lot of things generationally that really doesn't have any foundation on anything. It's more so like I'm the authoritative person and you do as I say. And that's just been passed down. But I think it's important for our kids to know the differences that they have from us, and it's important for us to be able to hear their voice because it develops like their sense of belonging in the family structure, but it also gives them confidence so that down the line, so they're comfortable in their opinions. Nobody wakes up at 21 years old and they can be vocal about how they feel or what they need or what they're experiencing. And so you have to, as the Bible said, you have to train up a child as you hope that they will go. And preparing them, I know it's a lot sometimes when my daughter says stuff to me and I'm like, oh my God, I really want to slap you down. But it's like, this is the person that I'm trying to prepare for the world. And so I think it's important. We have to break some of those stigmas because sometimes kids know more than we know. Sometimes we don't know because, like you said, things have changed. Absolutely. And we're in a different time to have access to a lot of things. And sometimes those things are kid appropriate and sometimes they're not. But if you set it up to where your child can communicate to you with confidence, then your child is open to expressing or having those conversations with you about different things. So.
And one thing about that generational factor that I want to mention, as far as like the Gen Zs and the millennials and Generation X and like baby boomers and things, is that what makes it a generation is that they socially, economically experience some of the same things in the world. Mm-hmm. So that shapes beliefs and thoughts and behaviors and all of those things, creates those shared value systems among the generations because of their shared experience and shared views really during those times, like behaviors and all of those things creates those shared values. Okay, awesome. So parent traumas is another one that impacts the parent-child the communication relationship. Now, you guys speak on that before I go and elaborate. So parent traumas is very important to address when it comes to parenting because we sometimes can reflect our traumas onto our children unwittingly. We don't mean to do these things. It's just it's sometimes unknowingly.
Take it away, school counselor.
Right. I think I'm just gonna, reiterate what you said. As parents, we really have to look at ourselves and think about some of the things that we've learned that do not really serve us. And so when we have children, like you said, we project, and we have to realize that our children are not us. They're not going to do the things that we did. They're not going to want the things we want. And we have to be okay with that. And I think sometimes we're not okay with that because of the generational trauma, but also the trauma that we have from our own parents, because then we have to relive some of the things in our childhood that we never really like addressed. And I think so, yes.
And a big factor about
It's
that parent trauma part as well is that we will sometimes have our own phobias. Like, oh
mm-hmm.
man, the world is crazy, and
Yeah,
it's this and it's that, and
yeah,
I don't want them. It's pedophiles and all these other factors that we know are very serious, of
yeah.
course. But we hold those traumas because of
Mm-hmm.
what we've seen and
Mm-hmm.
heard and maybe experienced, that we're not giving our children an opportunity to make decisions that they need to make
Mm-hmm.
amongst social environments and different challenges and things,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
I honestly see it a lot in the school system, where parents have had their own experience with the education system. And so when it comes to their kids, they project in meetings, and it's just like, wow, okay, you know.
or will prevent them from receiving
Yeah,
benefits,
services. Yeah,
services,
yeah,
because of their own, traumas or beliefs about different, services and things.
yeah,
Just like you mentioned, as far as social workers.
yeah,
Social workers are an amazing resource for families. They have
yeah.
so much access to
Hmm.
so many things from a political standpoint, because they are working directly with the government and all these different resources that are provided to the communities.
Yeah,
There's a lot of hate toward these systems. I do understand that, but these systems can also be leveraged in some of the most powerful ways, you
yes.
know?
And even what you named as hate, I think it kind of goes back a little bit to what's already been said, is previous experiences and trauma, right? You said something earlier about rooted in phobia. And when we talk about phobias, that just pretty much means fear of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times it's this fear of not knowing, the unknown. And what happens with trauma is anything that reminds us, that looks like, smells like, feels like something that we have experienced in the past that hurt us, takes us back to that place, we don't want to deal with it. We
Mm-hmm.
shut down, right? And so I think one of the parts of kind of understanding our parenting is really being aware of our stuff, as in the things that we parents have been through, but also really asking yourself, and I'm sure that it evolves through the course of your parenting, is what is informing your parenting? What and who, right? So
Yeah,
some people parent from fear, to make it personal, like some of my friends say that my mom was really hard on me growing up, but her whole thing was, I don't want you to go through some of the things that I went through.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of a space of parenting from fear. Some people can parent from, like, let's be honest, poverty. Poverty is traumatic. Nobody talks
Absolutely.
about the relationship between trauma and poverty. And people who have like trauma poverty, it's kind of like I mean, I really know people like millionaires when they have a number in their head, right? If their bank account does not look like that number, they begin to feel uneasy,
yeah,
right? And so parents who parent from a poverty lens is just kind of like, I have family members, I don't never want to go back to that place. I remember
yeah,
when we used to eat this and this. And so they push their kids really hard in the academic span of things, right? Like, I really want you grades, straight A's, or whatever it may be. And so I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but I'm thinking it's very, very important to understand what informs your parenting and being
yeah.
open to allowing that to shift.
Right, right.
Absolutely. That is so important. So a key note and takeaway that you just said through there is recognizing your own,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing your own parenting style. So that means becoming aware of how you are parenting, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to parent from a place of fear. We don't want to parent from a place of trauma. Why? Because it creates social and emotional challenges for our children.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
prevents them, or it severely impacts their self-esteem,
Mm-hmm.
their ability to be confident in their own abilities, because
Yeah.
they are so damaged because of some our communication strategies. Some parents, parenting from that trauma perspective, they will call their children out of their names, bitches, and you so ugly and stupid. And
Yeah.
I know that parents don't deliberately want to cause damage. I want to believe that, because I feel confident we love our children, right? We don't want to deliberately make them feel like crap, but some of the ways that we communicate with them create social and emotional challenges or impact relationships,
Mhm.
you know?
I agree. I don't think that parents are deliberately doing these things. I think these are just things that they've learned along the way. And I think sometimes what we fail to realize is that, like you said, they really affect our child's social emotional. We have kids like I can only speak from my experience in a school. There are kids who are like striving so hard. They have no balance socially and academically. And academics are great, but at the end of the day, there's a social emotional aspect that's very important to you building relationships down the line with other people and being able to maintain those relationships, because you can have straight A students and start a corporation, but if you don't know how to treat people who work for you, then you've missed a piece of that balance. Everything is a balance, and I honestly do not think parents wake up and say, I'm gonna call my daughter a bitch, or I'm gonna call my son this, or whatever it may be. It's just something that's in their mind that they're still dealing with things. And like we say, you go back and you kind of deal with yourself, because at the end of the day, like I said, we've learned things along the way that haven't necessarily served us to
Right.
be the parents that we need to create healthy, full, and whole individuals who can
Mhm.
actually function in a world amongst people that are different than them in all kind of aspects.
Because some of our parents believe that, strongly believe that they are not the reason why we turned
Mm,
out maybe the way we did, or
yes.
their children turning out the way they did. And that is 100% a lie. It
And
starts
it's a
at
slap
the
in the
home
face for
part.
some parents.
It
Some
starts
parents, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was
No.
just agreeing with you saying, like, some parents, I mean, like from my own personal experience, just having conversations about things that happened, and it was kind of like, taken as, oh, you're saying I'm not a good parent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, what I needed at that time, I understand now that you weren't able to give me, but what you gave me made me feel this way, or it
Hmm.
made me respond this way, or it made me go through my 20s and my adulthood this way. And so,
Mm.
I think the generation of our parents come from, it's like it's taken extremely personal. Like, you're saying I'm not a good parent,
Yes.
and I gave you everything I could, and I completely
Bing, bing,
understand
bing.
it. Yeah,
That's that key word we always hear. Well, I
yeah,
did the best that I could.
yeah,
I understand that you did the best that you could.
yeah,
However, under your environmental circumstances, potentially, it wasn't good for me.
Mhm.
It caused me a lot of things,
right,
experience a lot of different hardships in my 20s and
yeah,
whatever age that some people go through. I know people who are in their 50s and 60s who are struggling because
yeah,
of their parental relationships.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? And some of their parents are long in heaven, or, deceased. And it's like they are still carrying that weight.
yeah,
So clearly our parent relationships are impacting our mental health severely. So now we want to dive into how the communication relationship impacts child development. Because as we know, whether we want to grow with our kids or not, as far as developmentally, they are doing it
mm,
year by year, adolescent through adult to elder. They're going through these different experiences developmentally, and it's important that we acknowledge these and go along with them, because we're growing and evolving as well. We're year by year going
mm.
through our stages of development still. So let's talk about how the communication relationship impacts child development. Firstly, emotional well-being.
Mm. Yeah,
Wellness. I mean, just allowing space or room for all emotions,
Mm,
right? And naming that, right? Or encouraging use of ways to allow them to name their emotions.
yeah.
I don't, as a provider, I don't see children. I see adults 18 and up. But what amazes me is, again, I don't see children, but I would say at least 75% of the time, if not 80, even though I see adults, most of what we're addressing has something that has been rooted in childhood.
mm,
And one of the number one things, particularly with women, so there's a relationship between anxiety and lack of assertiveness, right? So
Mm,
if you don't have the ability to say what you need and say what you're feeling, and that stuff builds up. that stuff builds up. So you're thinking about it. And then you're having these conversations in your head about, well, what if I say this? Then Jackie's going to say this, and this is going to happen. Or you say something to Jackie, then you're continuing to think about it all day. I probably should have said that because now she's going to think this. And so having this fear of, one, asking for what they need, two, saying whatever it is, how they feel, right? Women have a fear of being misunderstood. And don't let it be Black women. It's even heightened, right? Because you leave your parents home, and then the corporate world tells you you're not being assertive, you're being a bitch, right? And so you're constantly having to teeter between these two worlds where you just begin to silence yourself. And so to make that relationship with parenting, encourage your children. Encourage your children to ask for what they need. Praise them when they ask for what they need. Praise them when they give voice to what they're feeling. When you see them shrink, or it's something that they want, or even when you find that they're afraid to ask for something, explore that. Why couldn't you ask mommy for applesauce? Right? Why couldn't you? Right? Explore that, because those little things, I know they may seem very elementary to you, but those little things become big things. They become the foundations and the stages that you're talking about.
Now, Yashica, what are you noticing in the schools with the children? Because school counselors, teachers, educators, they are with our children half of the day, majority of the year. You know, is you see so much, you know, because you see them in their raw essence. When I ain't with mama, when I can act up, you know, I ain't got daddy here. You know.
Oh, yes.
So as far as emotional well-being and their development, and you know, just being in the relationships you've seen among the parents.
Well, usually when I meet a kid and they're kind of all over the place emotionally, once I meet the parent, it all makes sense. But a lot of times parents don't realize the things that the kids see, whether it's or hear verbally, non-verbally. You don't have to necessarily communicate it. It stresses them out when they come to school. And in a lot of circumstances, we have kids who are stressed about what they're going to eat when they get home. We have kids who are stressed about bills that they don't even pay. We have kids who are stressed about something happening with a sibling and custody situations. Stuff that kids should not be carrying. And a lot of times we have kids that come to school and I'm like, okay, well, you're going to have to I will let you take a nap in my office for about 30 minutes, but you're going to have to get it together for the rest of the day, because they can't function. If the emotional well-being is not there, kids don't know how to function. They're not adults. They have to be given the skills to be able to function in situations like that, where they're stressed out about things that they really have no control over. And so I keep snacks in my office. We keep uniforms. I keep pads. We have students who get their cycles and their parents don't even know that they have their cycles. And we're sending home pads and we're having conversations about what that is. And a lot of it, our conversation, and I hate to put so much on parents, but a lot comes back to what happens at home and what kids see at home. And if they don't see their balance at home, when they're in other social settings or academic setting, it really affects everything. So you have a student who's stressed about things that they're seeing at home, and academically they're behind. Eventually that leads to other things because they don't know the work. So they're going to act out behavior wise. And so there's going to be a whole nother dynamic, and that's create a whole nother flow of things that could happen, especially in the school system, because everything needs to be contained, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So it's to see it in a school setting, it's sometimes disheartening because there's so many kids who are really struggling, not just academically, but socially. And a lot of the skills that they need should have been foundations from home. But now the school is now acting as home and school. And so that adds stress on the teachers and the staff.
You know, another developmental factor as it relates to the communication with parent and child is confidence and self-esteem, self-worth. You know, that's a part of that social and emotional context that gets impacted by the day-to-day communication among the parent and child. So what is very important to consider is adjusting parenting styles throughout their development. You know, Mandy, share some insight therapeutically as far as, even because you see young adults. So beyond that childhood phase where it's like, oh, they'll get over it, you know. No, they go to college with this.
Yeah.
They establish relationships with other people, and then we got this wave of, oh, trauma here. People shouldn't get in relationships having trauma and carrying all these things, just all these statements that people want to make, you know.
So you talk about adjusting parenting styles throughout their development, but I think it's also important to adjust parenting styles throughout your development as a parent, right? Because you, like Jackie, you have multiples, right? And you have 6 people that are looking up to you as mom, right? And let me ask you this. Do you parent all 6 of your kids? Does the same Jackie show up for all 6 of her kids?
Absolutely not. I have to adjust my parenting. And, you know, I have 4 biologically, 2 of my stepchildren. I know I've said this through the live before, but I also raised my siblings,
right?
You know, which are still young children. So I have to be flexible in my approaches, because not each person can even comprehend the way each one, you know, it's a completely different mind.
Right.
And I think that ties into Yashica. When you were speaking earlier, you said something about their children. They're not adults. And while I don't think it's intentional, I think in our everyday lives with pressures and managing so many things, we see little bodies and we just think that they're young adults, thinking that they think like we think, they have the same reasoning, the same logic that we have, just on small bodies. And it's not. The brain is a muscle, and it's continuing to develop, right? And so even understanding even some of the ways you discipline kids, the way you discipline, and I'm not speaking physically, but just the way you implement consequences from a 3-year-old should not look the same as someone who is 10, right? And so understanding where they are developmentally, what they can process, how they're going to experience what you said to them or how you're saying it makes a major difference. I remember one time I had my goddaughter, and this was years ago, and we were at church, and we went to the bathroom, and she was just like acting out, just having a hard time. And so I literally remember, in dress and heels and all, getting down on the floor, because she was very tiny, to kind of literally meet her where she was. And this person that was standing outside the restroom was like, you should put that in the bottle and sell it. And I didn't do anything. But all I did was literally, I think the body language was, I'm going to literally meet you where you are. Because even I'm 5'8", me standing over a 2-year-old, no matter what I'm saying, she's automatically going to shrink. And so even coming down to her size was, hey, let's talk about this. I don't want you to look at my size and shut down, but I'm going to come down here and we're going to talk about kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the conversations we usually have at the beginning of the year with our newer teachers. You have to meet kids where they at. And you may, like you said, you're tiring over a small child. They're looking at you in fear sometimes, and you have to really come down and get to their level and talk to them. You have to also be able to communicate so that they can comprehend, because that's a big piece of communication. Like, if I can't comprehend what you're communicating to me, I really don't really understand, and I really don't know how to respond the way I need to respond.
And you know, as far as parents with that communication factor, I've heard parents say before, well, I know my child will come talk to me. I know my child. Nobody know my child better than me, right? However, sometimes we intimidate our children. It could be our tone, our look when they say "ma." You never know what mood we're in when they come to us. So that alone sometimes is intimidating. And what they originally came to talk to us about, now it becomes a fear, and they don't even want to do that now. It's never mind, or they'll talk about something that really is of non-relevance, and then what we might say, get out my face, go ahead, go sit down somewhere, leave me alone. You know, whole time originally they came there for a purpose that was maybe important to them. Like as it is important to acknowledge again, suicide is growing at a tremendous rate right now, especially among young children, you know, and a lot of parents don't recognize the signs. They don't understand what's going on. They, you know, don't know where this could be coming from, because I'm doing the best I can. I'm being there. I'm listening to them. I talk to them. I ask them every day how they're feeling and all these things. But Clearly, there is a disconnect. So instead of continuously trying to figure out what's the disconnect by following the same systems over and over and over again, let's change up our way of doing things. And let's really utilize some of these resources as what we're talking about today to really broaden our parenting perspectives. So let's go into some examples of unhealthy parent-child communications, right? So one, tone. We've mentioned that tone thing.
Yeah. Tone is everything.
And it can be so intimidating, right?
Yeah.
I remember my children saying to me all the time, why you guys say it like that? You know, and a part of my initial authoritative personality is like, I'm grown. I can say what I want, but hey, that's my mama stuff. That's my grandmama stuff, right? Versus me understanding like, oh, well, look, I didn't mean nothing by it. What do you need? What's up? You know, because I'm not saying we have to change ourselves to accommodate our children. However, we have to compromise. Why? Because we decided to raise a human. And these humans are not just, you know, little robots we can punch punch keys in.
Right.
And they do what we want them to do, you know.
But that parenting would be easy in that case. Look.
Language.
Language, oh yes.
You know, can be an unhealthy form. So, Eddie, go into that language perspective as far as that young adult that you may see that come in, who mom is, you know, have called them bitches, you know, or have said to them like, you know, you ugly, get away from me, you know, you're so stupid. Like I've watched parents say this to their children before.
Yeah. Again, going back to the point of six systems, right? It's, you know, we'll be talking, we'll be working together for a while, and you bring something up, and literally people are still working every day to get the voices out of their head. Not like auditory hallucinations, but literally the memories and sounds out of their head of what people have called them. You have 40, 50-year-olds still trying to change the narrative. It's almost like if you've ever known anyone that has lost a significant amount of weight, right? So if you ever known anyone that's lost a significant amount of weight, and if you ever, it's like they still wear baggy, like their clothes are swallowing them. And then you're like, you know that's a little bit too big. They can't see the new them. They're still shopping in the same size. They don't recognize that their story has changed, right? And sometimes I see the same thing in my work. In regards to, it's been 40, they're 40, they're 50 years old, and they're still hearing, believing, living into things that have been said to them when they were younger. So helping people recognize, like, who is it that you're still believing? What story, what part of your story has changed, but you haven't recognized it, right? And so sometimes I think you all had given the example of parents, and for some people, somebody or their parent or parental figure referring to them as a bitch or a stupid H or whatever it may be is just as common as using their first name. Sometimes they don't budge by it. But when you have those situations and you get into relationships, then when someone refers to you as that, it's normal. Sometimes it could be so problematic or maladaptive that when you're not referred to as the B word, right, then something's wrong. Maybe he or she doesn't love me the way that they thought that, I did. The way that I thought that they did. So
Absolutely. And we are in no way, let's state for the record, we are in no way at all saying that parents are wrong, that the way you're doing things is wrong, or that you don't love your children, any of those things. All we're doing is shedding light into information on behaviors that are unhealthy for a developing human.
Right.
If you care about their growth and well-being, that's the intake we want you to receive from this live chat, right? So sign us in their voices.
Oh, that's a big piece. I know I can speak to that, especially having a daughter. And I know growing up for me, it was kind of like, you do as I say. You don't ask no questions. This is what it is, and that's what it's going to be. And you can ride this out until you move out, for the most part. And that was something that I realized as an adult, it silenced my voice in ways where I realized I needed to speak up. But when I spoke up, it was kind of like I went too far. sometimes because I wasn't used to using my voice. And I felt so passionate about what I was saying or what I needed to say that sometimes it went too far and I didn't know to take a step back. And so it's been important to me as a parent to allow my child to be able to communicate to me. I've had an instance where I had her, she was cleaning up something. She had made a mess. And I was like, baby, I'm not cleaning it up. You clean it. That's your mess. And she came back later and she was like, I really didn't appreciate how you said what you said to me. And I just felt like I was a slave. And I'm like, girl, you're not a slave. You made the mess. You're going to clean up the mess. That's just what it is. And she was like, well, I just didn't like the way you said it.
Yes.
And that day, it was just kind of like, it hit me like, okay, like this is the child, this is the human that I want to see, or the human that I want to help prepare for the world, where you're communicating to me about how I made you feel in that moment.
Yes, absolutely.
And I apologize, even though, I mean, I meant what I said. You made the mess, you're going to clean it up. But I did apologize for the way I said it and the way that she possibly received it. But I was very happy that she was able to say, now I can't get her to stop telling me stuff. And I'm like, okay, you're doing too much now. Just, you know.
Right. So my son, he said something today during social emotional learning workshops. He said, you know, Black people don't apologize, you know, and when we don't set these examples or model the behaviors we want them to, you know, produce out into social environments and you know, it creates those thoughts they come up with there in their own head. Like they run with their own beliefs and thoughts and systems. And a lot of times those are unhealthy, you know. Another thing that's, you know, unhealthy in communication is, you know, like you said, Mandy, running over receipts.
Sometimes receipts are good, sometimes.
And, you know, I get it. You know, it's like, look, I'm doing all of this for you, you know. But what are we teaching them?
I think that what's the word? Contributes to maybe some level of guilt or maybe like a level of a burden. I pay the light bills, I pay this, I make sure I have a there are 5, right? Like what's the alternative? Like what do you want them like you want to be reimbursed? Like so when you make comments like that, who is it for? And I'm wondering if there is a way that you can say that a 6-year-old, one, ask yourself, what's your goal? What are you trying to communicate? And what's the response that you're looking for? Sorry, my printer is just doing its thing. I don't know why. What is the response that you're looking for? And is this appropriate? Like, can a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old comprehend this?
Right. And that goes back to when I was talking about students showing up to school stressed about bills. And well, my mama said that we got somebody's coming through to do a walkthrough. We may not have our house. Why are you concerned with that? You know, and you should never make your kid feel guilty about you making a choice to have them. That's not.
And you know, we it's good to be mindful of the discussions that we have around them or in the vicinity, because then when they start to say these things or reiterate what they've been hearing, we want to jump down their throat and say they're too grown or all these other things. Like I can remember being a kid, right? I was like 7, 8, 9 years old, right? And I used to live up in you know, the Park Heights area, and it was a little playground in the back of the houses in the alley. So at the time, one of my relatives, he was into you know, selling drugs and things. So we're walking with me and him, and you know, we're walking past the collective, and I heard a guy say, "Yo, anybody got the such and such?" So me as a little kid, I'm like, "Yeah, my family got it."
Listen.
So, like you say, I don't understand what I said. You know what I mean? I didn't know that was wrong, right? Because I'm exposed to it, so I don't know that this is wrong. However, I got popped in the head for it, you know, because I said something that, you know, I shouldn't have said. However, I was exposed to these things as well, right? So let's go over some healthy forms of communication. How about trying other ways to communicate, right? It doesn't always have to be verbal. right? In school systems and advocacy services for children with disabilities, we use color codes and things like that, right? Red, green, and where you are. Like sometimes originally a while ago I used to do it with my children too. Like, look, not let's establish this so we understand these boundaries, right? Because sometimes we have to what? Come down to their level. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The power of a hug. I mean, appropriately, if your child can receive that, and even just kind of if they're sitting there doing their homework or a pat on the back, like the power of appropriate touch. Now, that's a whole other conversation, but the power of appropriate touch is just, I see you, I love you, I want to encourage you, you're doing a good job. You'd be amazed at the number of children that haven't been embraced. I don't know if you've seen some of the social media videos. They have these videos where some teachers kind of start their day and kids get to pick their hug or handshake or whatever it may be. Some kids are never hugged or, embraced in such a way. And even if we go way back to psychological studies, like Failure to Thrive, they had studies where they would have newborns and they would have newborns over here, who were not touched, and then newborns over here who actually had physical touch, and who evolved more, like what children, with what happened when these babies were nurtured. I don't think that stopped, at us. The number of people that experienced depression during the pandemic simply because the power of touch. You are isolated for however long you were isolated, there was a result or a consequence to that. So again, you can communicate things without even opening your mouth. And so being mindful of that.
Absolutely. Discipline with thought or mindfulness. Instead of jumping in with that anger and that, what they're really expecting. I mean, how many parents have had children who they have to spank every week or every day? Or, I was just at a center, and the young lady that was monitoring her children, she said, to one of the kids, I don't even know why you playing. You act like your mother don't beat you. Like you're in a public place saying this loud. Like, we're not thinking about the implications emotionally that is on that child, and all of that is damaging them,
I mean, yeah, that's a huge piece. I know that's a huge piece for me because my mom would slap us down right where we stood, and I would be so embarrassed. I'm like, oh my God. And I can now, as a parent, I feel the emotional turmoil when my daughter does something disrespectful, and I'm like, oh my God, I just want to knock you down. But it's like, okay, take a moment, come back to this conversation after the fact, because it's embarrassing. And it also does a lot to a child's self-confidence in the long run. And my child, she'll shut down, but she'll start back talking. But
absolutely. So, sometimes we have to check ourselves, think about those triggers, because certain words that we say could trigger an emotion or a thought in our children that limits their ability to receive anything we saying after that word or that we that we said. And even like
you said something about, if your kids act out, or like when you say something to your child, that's embarrassing to them.
Yeah.
I think a lot, like what I've seen sometimes out in public, is like this power struggle.
Yeah.
And I noticed that parents engage in power struggles when they feel embarrassed, right? So really being aware of what makes you feel embarrassed. I know a lot, especially on planes. I don't know why. Maybe I don't understand because I'm not a parent. Like when their child starts screaming or crying on an airplane, this level of shame that you could almost feel from the parent. And because they're feeling that shame, they lose their patience and kind of begin to act out. You're on an airplane. Like it's nothing. It's nothing you can do about it, right? And even when kids don't have the language, I'm telling you, kids and pets can feel energy. When you become anxious and frustrated and all of that, they don't have the words to say, "Mommy, chill." But they experience that. So we have to be mindful of those things. And y'all who are flying, give parents some grace. They don't want to be on that plane with that baby just like you don't want them there. So give them some grace.
But it's not just a parent thing. I think it's an adult thing, because you see it. I see it every day in the school system. Teachers feel like, I'm the adult and we're battling with kids. And I'm like, that's not That's not what we're here to do. You know what I'm saying? We're here to work together. That child is behaving the way they're behaving because they're trying to communicate something that they don't have the words for. And you have to be patient enough to just help them work through it. And that's,
Uh-huh.
you know, that I guess that comes back to that comprehension piece of communicating, because some kids don't know how to comprehend why they're behaving the way they're behaving. But if you're having a power struggle with them, you're never going to win, because we're going to go back and forth, and then you're never going to build that relationship to get
Exactly.
to be able to run your classroom. Because if a
Or
child does
even
not
your home.
respect you,
From a
yeah,
parent
your home,
perspective, that
when a child
communication,
loses
I understand, is important.
right, when a child loses respect for you, it's going to be very hard for that child to regain their respect. And it's going to be very hard for them to learn from you. It's going to be very hard for them to receive anything from you.
And if you get the right child, they're gonna try it. Y'all gonna go back and forth.
Every time.
One powerful tool with communication and discipline, though, is allowing the child to possibly either explore with the child or allowing the child to identify their consequence.
Right.
Now, what do you think would be a good consequence? What do you think would be a fair consequence? Right. They might play in your face for a little bit, right? Like not watch TV for 30 minutes, right? But, you know, and you can keep having a conversation. You think that's enough? What do you think? Mommy's not going to make the decision today. What do you think? And I think that empowers them, but it also allows them to take some responsibility.
Right.
Absolutely. Accountability, right? That is very important. And also using reinforcers and encouragers. Like these kids, you cannot imagine how much they battle that self-esteem thing, that confidence issue, that, you know, emotional context. They need that encouragement and reinforcements. I've heard so many kids just doubt themselves and down themselves. And it's like, you can do this. You can. Believe in yourself. You know what I mean? Like, because they're not receiving that often. You know, one thing we want to do as parents, ultimately, we want them to be able to manage their thoughts, distractions, and influences. Because without that ability, they are literally left in the hands of social media, influencers, and rap lyrics that are telling them to be intimate and all these things that these children are exposed to naturally, you know, because of environmental circumstances. You know, some people don't always let the kids listen to certain music because of that type of influence, because everything they hear and see is an influence. So what we want to bring into this segment is youth's perspectives as well. So we have a teenager that is going to join us today. You have been waiting in the lobby. Thank you so much for joining us.
How are
We're doing great. So we want to get tips from you. So Cinya, can you introduce yourself and also let us know where you got your resources and what information you got from some of the teenagers that you've surveyed?
Okay, I am 16 and I got my resources from peers in my school. When I go to school with, I want to mention how what are some ways you could better your relationship with your parents, and they just gave me feedback. But majority of them said about, you know, around the same.
So give us some feedback. Are you there, Cinya?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you were breaking up just a little bit. So give us some of the tips that you collected from teenagers. So you go to 2 different schools. So you were able to survey what, maybe 30 kids?
Yes, about 30, yes.
All right. Can you give us some of those tips, please? And also share your perspective as a youth as well.
So they roughly said about the same thing. So some said sometimes it's better to have a bond with the parent, kind of like a friend type of relationship, but most parents don't like to have that type of relationship because they look at it as like they have the authority, you know what I mean? Like, so most parents don't like that, but a lot of the kids that I asked questions, they said that. They also said try to look at it from a child's perspective because everything's different in this generation. It's not how parents grew up. It's not how their parents raised them. So it's different now. So try to look at it in a different perspective, and then look at it like the generation that the kids are in, what's around the kids. Try to look at it through their perspectives, and not as a parent.
And now, Cinya, can you give us a little bit of your insight? Thank you. I'm glad you're back. Can you give us a little bit of your insight into viewing their perspectives? So, what do you mean by viewing challenges from their perspective?
Can you repeat that? You broke up a bit.
Yes. I said, what do you give us a little insight into your perspective on how can parents do it from the children's perspective? Like, what are some examples that you as a teenager feel like would help the communication relationship be a lot more received?
I feel like not pressuring the kids to talk and giving them time to talk and space to be able to talk. Because when parents, kind of pressure the kids to talk, the kids tell them basically what they want to hear. So it's not really telling them what's honestly wrong with them. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, like I was saying, like when you don't look at it, when you try to pressure your kids into talking, it don't help them be honest. You know what I mean? They'll tell you what you want to hear instead of telling you what's actually wrong with them. So then you'll be thinking everything's fine, but in reality, your kid is really actually suffering from something else. But they just weren't ready to open up and tell you. So now you don't know, and you're wondering why your kid's acting like this. But sometimes kids aren't ready to open up and share. Sometimes they need to process what's wrong with them first to understand what's wrong with them to be able to tell the parent. And when they're not ready, the parents like to pressure them, like, tell me what's wrong, tell me so I can help you. Sometimes the kids don't fully understand what's wrong with them.
Absolutely agree. What other some tips? So you have create the bond, do challenges from their perspective, kind of like, meet them at their level, which is one of the, tips that we mentioned as well to create that bond, that relationship among parent and child,
Yeah, so another one was not lecture the kids, to communicate in a manner where, like, I understand you, not in a manner where, like, oh my God, why would you do this? I'm so disappointed. That doesn't make the kid feel any better about what they've done, the decision they made. So then they tend to shut down and not tell you what's wrong and not be honest with you. So it's better to come at it with a more understanding perspective than a lecture. Because when you're lecturing the kids, it's like, oh my God, it's the same thing over and over. She just preaching and preaching. She's not listening to me. So when you listen, and let the kid explain what's wrong, and then you try to give feedback instead of before they even tell you what's wrong. You're trying to tell them what's wrong with them instead of letting them tell you what's wrong, and letting them get time and space to be able to express that. When you come and lecture, it doesn't help them be open on it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's
so
great.
We have a comment. It says, I've been through so much, and I feel like so much of what I've gone through had so much effect on my little girl. And that is a very interesting, point that you make, Laura, because we mentioned that a little earlier about some of the traumas that the parents experience. It can have an impact on how our parenting styles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we mentioned as well, as far as like just to be able to do something different, is like we need to create a different relationship, a different parenting style, instead of doing our norms and the same things we're used to doing. Let's try other ways of communicating and connecting with our children, as some of the resources like Cinya just mentioned, understanding their perspective versus lecturing them and things like that, and doing things from their standpoint.
Another one was setting boundaries. Yeah, that was kind of roughly what a lot of the people I asked said, setting boundaries and trusting that the kid will eventually come and open up to you. Someone said, trusting setting boundaries and knowing when to back off and give space. It gives them time to feel open to you. When it feels rushed and forced, we don't like to open up and tell you because it's just like, are you going to listen? Are you going to actually process what's wrong with me and look at it from my point of view and not as a parent point of view? That's why I think, and I agree with them too, setting boundaries and knowing when to give the kid space to be able to express themselves is very important.
Thank
Absolutely.
you very much for that, Cinya. That is really helpful. I'm thinking you could have just did this whole thing by yourself,
By
and I
yourself.
would have listened. Can I ask Sanaya one question though?
Please do.
Sanaya, how do you think, and I don't know if this came up in your research, little scholar here, how do teenagers feel about therapy? Is it
How would I
something you
make a
will,
video about therapy?
yeah, like is it something that teenagers are like, okay, I'll go to therapy, or no, I'm not doing that. What's the stance?
Well, when I was in middle school, I looked at therapy as like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? Like, am I mentally crazy? But I think that was just because of the society around me. To I think everyone goes through that phase where they think when someone recommends therapy, it's them saying, "Oh my God, something's wrong with you. You need."
Hmm. Uh-oh.
I think we lost her a little bit. So I want to say thank you so much, Sanaya, but I don't think you're on there anymore. We kind of got to wrap it up. So we want to some resources, of course, for parents. So one of the resources that is important to, creating that healthy parent-child relationship is a support system.
Mm-hmm.
Mandy.
Making sure you don't have to carry it by yourself or carry it alone, even if you're a single parent. Look into your community and see how, even if you build a community of single parents, look into ways that you can build a team of, sometimes you just need a break. Can
Yes.
you come over here, or can I drop her or him off? Just being really intentional about trying your best not to carry it alone. Because if you have to carry it all alone, you're not going to show up as your best self. You're going to show up exhausted, tired, and your patience are going to be extremely thin.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Facebook has parenting groups. So you
Yeah.
can Google whatever, whether your child has different disorders or whatever. There are so many resources through Facebook groups for parents, school apps.
Mocha Moms is a really good one. I think they're broken down by regions. I'm not 1,000% sure, but I know it's an organization for moms of color. Another one is actually a good friend from college. A sorority sister has an organization called Happy Mama, Happy Minnie, and it pretty much focuses on, her whole idea is the more whole, the better. The healthier moms are, the healthier they raise healthier children.
Right.
And it's a
Right.
nonprofit based out of Atlanta. She does a lot of stuff in the community. And don't forget your PTAs, right? She could probably can speak to that, but
Yes.
I know PTAs are a
Yeah.
huge support system. I know that some are more active than others, but checking in to see if there's one at your school.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've also just put a parenting article in the chat because that is a very powerful resource.
Right.
When I was a young parent in my 20s and things like that, a big thing I was doing was reading. I was Googling things like, what is going on, with my son or my daughter, and what could I do? And I wanted to see what was out there,
Yeah.
what other parents are you going through some of these things too? Because we always think, what? We're the only ones going through this, right?
Mhm.
Nobody, our
Yeah.
children are just demons. Nobody else's kids is doing this. So parenting literature is a great resource as well. Family counseling, relying on your school
Yeah.
counselors, social workers, and mental health
Yes.
professionals. They are also an amazing resource,
Yeah.
especially counselors and social workers.
Yeah.
Don't believe the stigmas and feed into them. They are there to help you. I remember a young lady, briefly, her child, she was going through some different challenges, a single mother, in poverty and all these things. And, her children end up being taken by the system. Now, of
Mm.
course, we hear that in the black community, like, oh my God, right? But you know what that ended up happening for that mother? She ended up getting housing. She got her children back. Her children were in all type of services to help with their social and emotional support, all through that social worker support system, right? So we
Yeah.
definitely want to kind of like not let stigmas prevent us from receiving amazing resources.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have community organizations offering youth mentoring. If we can't do it because we're too busy, overwhelmed, dealing with these bills and all these other things we got to deal with, let's like you said, our community. Let's
Yeah.
lend on them because they're there for us. There are so many free programs like Counselors in the Community Association. We have a social and emotional learning program for youth where they go through workshops and build on those social and emotional skills like confidence, self-awareness, emotions management, peer communication, and all these different strategies that help them be better at coping with life's challenges and things like that through life, right? And that is the bulk of our presentation. We want to thank you so much for joining us. We are here once a month, the end of the month, every Tuesday, discussing mental wellness topics for the community. We bring it at a simple level. We relate it to real life situations because mental health is real. It impacts every single one of us. It's how we think, act, feel. It is everything, right? Join us every last Tuesday of each month. We will be here discussing another topic. Please invite your friends and family and share this live stream with on your page because you never know what parents need this. We have so many videos on our Counselors in the Community page that we also want you to feel free to share because mental health impacts us all, right? So again, share this stream and thank you so much for joining. Have a great evening.
Thank you.